It's Tuesday and somehow I'm already in the market for a cheap, easy one-pot meal. So I'm taking advantage of Taco Tuesday to make a vegetarian taco skillet. Really super simple, minimal cleanup, healthy ingredients, and this is one that your whole family will enjoy. I hope you'll stick with me. Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Thanks for being here. My week has felt like a million years long and it's only Tuesday. So all I could think about was tacos for this evening's dinner. I'm gonna do a riff on tacos, which is an easy one-pot vegetarian taco bake. Black beans, corn, cilantro, avocado, jalapenos, quinoa, tomatoes, chilies, onion, pepper, packed with veggies. Super easy, super fast. Most of it will come together on your stovetop. We'll do a little broiling of some cheese at the very end. Pretty easy ingredients, even minimal chopping today. And this one is healthy, so you can feel good about feeding this one to your family. The method here is really simple. We're gonna chop up a couple veggies that need to be cooked, and then we're gonna build a tasty base in which to cook some quinoa. Once that quinoa is cooked, I'm gonna mix in some Mexican-inspired mix-ins, top it with cheese, toss it under the broiler, and we have dinner. This one feels super hearty for a vegetarian meal. You might not even miss the meat. When we saute the onions and peppers, you could definitely add some meat back in, but I'm not gonna miss it in this meal today, so up to you if you wanna do that. Let's get going. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get an onion and a bell pepper chopped up and working for me on the stove. I've got a really big saucepan over here ready to use that has a lid. That's important. If you don't have something that can go from stovetop into the oven, skip the broiling part. You can melt the cheese at the end just by putting the lid back on. I just like to get the cheese a little bit golden brown and really bubbly. But first, before we get there, we've got to get some veggies going. So I'm gonna cut up an onion and a red bell pepper. This is a very big onion. You probably don't need this much onion. You could use about half of this much. We're just gonna cut this onion into bite-sized pieces. These one-pot meals all kind of have a similar method. And what I try to do with them is find inexpensive ways to get everything that you might need in a meal in a single pot. So you'll usually see some sort of a starch or a carb, which we've used rice in the past, we've used pasta, today we're using quinoa. You'll see a whole bunch of veggies because for me, these one-pot meals are a great excuse to just pack them with veggies. It ups both the volume of food that you're consuming, it ups the nutritional profile of what you're consuming, but it also is a relatively inexpensive way to make your meal go further. So the vegetables are usually relatively interchangeable. In this one, we're picking some really specifically Mexican-inspired flavors. But if there's something your family likes or doesn't like that I've got here, feel free to substitute at will. So onion going in our bowl. I'm gonna cut up our red bell pepper and get these in the pan at the same time. So when we make these one-pot meals, it's usually some sort of a flavorful base made of veggies or some protein, lots of spices to make it feel like it's been long cooking and we're not missing out on making multiple layers of flavor in multiple dishes. And many of them have cheese at the end. You wanna make sure that your one-pot meals don't feel like just a random assortment of mix-ins. You wanna try to create some sort of a sauce or a broth or something that brings the meal together. And so that's one of the reasons I tend to use cheese, but there's lots of different ways that you can do that. It doesn't have to be cheese. So if you happen to be vegan and are making this meal, just substitute non-dairy cheese or leave it out completely. Okay, over to the stove. I'm just gonna get these in my pan with some olive oil over kind of a low to medium heat. Next, I'm gonna cut up a couple things that aren't completely necessary in this dish. They're definitely optional, but they are nice additions. First is some green onions. I'm gonna use both the green and the white part of these onions. And these are just gonna be sprinkled over at the end. And then I'm also gonna cut up an avocado. This one feels like it's beautifully ripe. I bet this is a nice looking avocado on the inside. So the way I take the pit out of an avocado is probably a pretty common way to do it. You definitely have to be careful doing this because you have a sharp blade coming at your palm. But I just take the middle of my knife, gently hit the avocado seed, twist it around, and then usually I just hit the hilt of my knife against my garbage can and the seed pops right out. I like a nice thin slice of avocado. So the way I slice an avocado is to hold it in my hand, to run my knife down the avocado, and then I'll actually use a spoon to scoop out those nice slices. You see that I have a lime on my bench as well, completely optional, But because it's gonna be a minute between when I'm prepping this avocado and when I'm putting it on the top of my dish, I'm gonna add some citrus to my avocado so it doesn't turn brown. That's a good trick, is to just squeeze some citrus over your avocado, then there's less chance that it will turn brown. It also adds some nice flavor. Next, I'm gonna measure some spices. I do this in the palm of my hand, but feel free to use measuring implements if you like. We are using 2 tablespoons of paprika, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 tablespoon of cumin. Two tablespoons of paprika, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 tablespoon of cumin. Now, if you have one of those packets of taco seasoning, you can absolutely use that. I don't tend to buy those because some really weird ingredients in them that I cannot control. So I like to just kind of make my own taco seasoning from the spices that I have on hand. But if you've got one of those, feel free to use it. That would work very well here as well. So the last thing I have to do before we move over to the stove is rinse the quinoa. The best practice is to rinse it in a fine mesh sieve until the water runs clear. So I'm just gonna toss our quinoa in a sieve and start rinsing. Quinoa is rinsed. If you don't have quinoa or you're uncomfortable cooking with quinoa, feel free to use rice. You could use pasta, or you could even do this with the vegetables and the mix-ins and eat it over a salad. Everything else that we're doing happens either at the very end of the cook, back on the bench, or over on the stove. So I'm gonna relocate us over that away, and I'll see you in a sec. Hello, here we are at the stove. In my nice big oven-proof pan, I have our red pepper and an onion. So it's been on for maybe 4 minutes, and it's looking really good. Next, I'm gonna add a big tablespoon of garlic. You don't want your garlic to burn, so this is only gonna cook for 60 seconds, maybe at the most, over a medium heat. Give it a stir, get it all worked in. I'm gonna move the garlic, onions, and pepper to the side and add in our spices. I like to bloom spices before I add a lot of liquid to them. So all that means is that you fry them in a little bit of oil before you're adding a ton of liquid. So you can see me just gradually working them into the garlic, onions, and pepper mixture. This just adds more depth of flavor. And in a dish that's relatively quick cooking, it's not gonna simmer for hours and hours. You wanna get as much flavor as you can. We have yet to add salt or pepper, so some salt and pepper go in. Give that a quick stir. And now all of our veggies that need to be fully cooked are officially cooked. So what we're gonna do now is start building a nice base to cook our quinoa in. So I'm gonna use this whole 28-ounce can. This is fire roasted tomatoes. I'm injecting every type of Mexican flavor I can into every part of this dish. So we're using green chilies, we're using black beans and corn and cilantro, pepperjack cheese. So you can use any tomato product you want, but fire roasted are really nice here because it adds kind of some of that taco-y inspired flavor. So there's not a ton of liquid in those tomatoes actually. So for this amount of quinoa, it needs about 2 cups of liquid. So I'm gonna add about 2 cups of vegetable stock since there was very little liquid in those tomatoes. If you have a tomato product that is more liquidy, you may have to play with the ratios a little bit. So this is 4 cups or 32 ounces, so I'm gonna add about half of it. Okay, so we're gonna give that a stir, and then I'm gonna put our quinoa in with our broth. And also gonna add the chilies at this point. It's just 1 small can of mild diced chilies. I can pop the heat up because the goal is to bring this to a boil. And then much like rice, we're gonna cover it, reduce it, and simmer it for like 15 minutes until the quinoa is cooked. So it's been just a couple minutes and we've come to a boil. So I'm just gonna give it 1 final stir. Make sure nothing is sticking to the bottom, everything is combined. Lower the heat down to low. We just want to keep it at a simmer and pop a lid on. And this is going to cook for about 15 minutes or until the quinoa is done. So we'll just keep an eye on it. I'm going to stir it occasionally, but mostly keep the lid on and then come back to you when the quinoa is cooked. It's been 18 minutes. I think our quinoa is perfectly done. Looks amazing. So when I pull the quinoa away from the sides of the pan, it leaves a little bit of a trail, but it's still a little bit saucy, which is exactly what we wanted. So the last couple steps are very simple. I've got our broiler on high. If you don't have an oven-proof skillet that goes from stovetop to oven, don't worry about broiling. Just pop the lid back on when we get the cheese in there. But I want our cheese to get a little bit bubbly and hopefully a little bit brown. We'll see if that happens. But we've got to mix in a couple ingredients first. So I have a can of black beans that I've drained. I have not rinsed them. And I have like probably 1.5 cups of corn here, but you really only need about 1 cup. And then a little bit of cilantro. I'm not gonna use all of this, some of it's gonna go on top. I can kill the heat at this point because my corn has been sitting on the counter for probably like 40 minutes by now. So while it was frozen, it'll easily cook in the residual heat left over in this skillet. And before I pop our cheese inside and on top, I'm just gonna take a taste for seasoning. Super flavorful. It does need some more salt and pepper. Okay, salt and pepper are in. Give that a quick stir. And now I've got like, I think this is about 12 ounces of cheese, so about 1.5 cups. I'm gonna use a little bit for inside the dish and reserve a lot for the top, but you can split this up however you like. So just gonna stir a little bit in. And then the remainder is gonna go right on top. This is pepperjack cheese. While shredded cheese is not super expensive in the grocery store, it's always more cost effective to shred it yourself. And also there are these anti-caking agents in shredded cheese. So if you've got the extra time, I would shred the cheese yourself. Okay, so now this is off, everything's been mixed in. Got a couple toppings that will go on once it's done with under the broiler, but I'm gonna put this under the broiler for just a couple minutes. We gotta watch this carefully because the cheese can easily burn. So maybe 2 minutes under the broiler, and then we'll be ready to serve. Oh, perfect. I caught that just in time. And this looks absolutely amazing. So a couple add-ons for the top. I'm gonna sprinkle on some more cilantro. Some of our spring onions get sprinkled on. And then these are totally unnecessary, but kind of fun. They're called Sweet Heat. They're pickled jalapenos, and they are just delightful. And last but not least, some avocado. And there we have a delicious 1-pot vegetarian skillet for just like $4.25 a serving. I'm gonna get into this. Ooh, cheese. Gotta love a cheese pull. Okay, let's give it a bite. Get some cheese, avocado, those pickled jalapenos. This feels like tacos in a skillet. You could definitely eat this with tortilla chips. That would be delightful. You could even put it on a taco shell if you wanted, or on lettuce. But it's a pretty complete meal on its own. This one is pretty hearty, and I think you'll get minimum 6 servings, if not 8 servings, and at just a couple bucks a serving, it's worth giving it a try. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this 1-pot vegetarian taco skillet. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.